Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Empire Sports Talk. I am your host, Roman Gennaro. Let's jump right into this week's action. The NBA Finals are on the horizon, and for the third year in a row, it will be the Golden State Warriors and the Cleveland Cavaliers facing off to decide who comes home with the NBA title. This shouldn't surprise us by now. Like I said, it is the third straight year that those two teams have met on the NBA's ultimate stage, but it is still NBA history. It is the first time in NBA history that two teams have met in the NBA Finals for 3 consecutive years. So you can say that in the age of movie remakes and franchises that this is a trilogy that they're going for. So it's the Golden State Cleveland trilogy, and it starts very soon here in a couple of days in the NBA. All eyes will be on that. So that is the main story in basketball, but let's jump right into some other stuff. The biggest news coming out of Cleveland's series with Boston is that during that series, during the Eastern Conference Finals with Boston, LeBron James passed Michael Jordan for most playoff points in a career in NBA history. So LeBron James is now the all-time leader in playoff points scored. This is good for LeBron. We always compare him and Michael Jordan. We say Michael Jordan's better at this, LeBron's better at this. We have the argument over who's the GOAT or greatest of all time, and people come down on both sides. But now that this is actual evidence that there are things that LeBron does better than Michael Jordan. A lot of Michael Jordan faithful say Michael was better at everything. But now the checklist of things that LeBron would have to pass Michael on just checked one more off, and that's he scored more playoff points than LeBron. I'm not going to come down on either side of this issue in today's show, but we're going to talk about it a little bit. But congratulations to LeBron James for becoming the NBA's all-time playoff scoring leader. That was history, along with the finals three-peat. But let's just jump right into the LeBron-Michael thing. Like I said, people are going to have their opinions, and some are going to say Michael's the best, some are going to say LeBron's the best. But as I said in an earlier show, I think we have an issue when it comes to if there's somebody that we view as the greatest of all time, such as Michael Jordan or Wayne Gretzky or whoever you would say the best player in NFL history is, and that's an interesting issue. We'll get to that in a minute. We have an issue if somebody comes along that challenges that, even if everything suggests that they're better. And I'm not saying that everything's suggesting LeBron's better, but I'm using it as an example. Even if everything suggests that the newer guy is better, we have a hard time unseating the person that we see as the greatest of all time because after a while you start to romanticize that person and say, oh, well, we'll use him as an example. Michael Jordan was the greatest basketball player of all time. He could do no wrong. And then you start to get to the point where you're like, he never missed a shot. He never turned the ball over, which is not true. But because we've romanticized Michael Jordan for so long, that, that'll happen. That happens. But here's why I think the Michael and LeBron argument is a little silly. And I will say that they, in my opinion, they are the two greatest players of all time. I'll leave it at that. And it's definitely arguable. You could say Magic, Kobe, Shaq, Larry Bird, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, whatever. I'm just saying that in my opinion, Michael Jordan and LeBron James are the two greatest players of all time, regardless of order. But to compare the two is silly to me because they're such different players. First of all, LeBron is much bigger than Michael. Michael was a 2-guard. LeBron is, you could say, naturally a 3, but LeBron can really play all 5 positions on the floor. Michael couldn't do that. Michael probably shoots a little bit better than LeBron. LeBron is more intimidating than Michael. LeBron is more of a facilitator, whereas Michael was a scorer, and neither one is bad. But when Michael Jordan had the ball in his hands, his mindset was, I'm going to put this in the basket. LeBron's is, where are my teammates at? Do I have a clear shot at the rim? There's 1,000 things going on in LeBron's head. He's so many steps ahead. LeBron is a playmaker. Michael Jordan was a scorer. They each have their own skill sets, but they're not the same type of player. So it's weird to say that one is better than the other. I would compare LeBron more to Michael's teammate, Scottie Pippen, and of course LeBron is better than Pippen, but just from style of play and everything, it's silly to me to compare a 6'8", 250 five-way player to a 6'5", 6'6" scoring shooting guard, because they're not the same at all. In terms of legacy, that's when you start to talk about it. But what's interesting to me is we always have the conversation of greatest basketball player of all time, greatest baseball player of all time, greatest hockey player of all time. But we never really hear the conversation greatest football player of all time. We tend to classify football players by their positions, and even then, we usually use the term one of way more than we use it in any other sport. For instance, we tend to say, Tom Brady is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Dan Marino is one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Joe Montana, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Peyton Manning, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Because for some reason we can't nail down the greatest quarterback of all time. For instance, Tom Brady has 5 Super Bowls. Joe Montana has 4, but Joe Montana never lost a Super Bowl. Brady has 3 losses. Peyton Manning was probably the greatest regular season quarterback of all time, but he was 1-2 in Super Bowl 2-2. He didn't have the greatest Super Bowl record. Sorry, I'll look that up and I'll fix that. He was 2-2 in Super Bowls. Yeah, 2-2. Yeah. Dan Marino never won a Super Bowl, but for a while held most of the passing records. So we say one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, but you can't compare, for instance, Joe Montana against Jerry Rice or Barry Sanders and say which one of those guys is the greatest football player of all time, because they're so different. And you're not going to compare Ted Williams and Nolan Ryan and say which is the greatest baseball player of all time. You shouldn't, because they're so different. There's not that many comparables. Basketball is different because both players play both ways all the time. But it's interesting to me that we have those conversations in football, baseball, football and baseball mostly, where we're willing to say one of the greatest players. But then when it comes to basketball, it has to be who is the single greatest player of all time. That's interesting to me. So I don't think there's much of a debate, and there's always going to be. I'm not trying to put that to rest. It's kind of fun to debate greatest players, but it's something to think about, that those two players aren't really all that similar in their styles and in their makeups, in their skill sets, and yet it's between those two. Okay, I want to spend the next couple minutes, and I won't spend long on this, just because I plan to publish a blog post on blogger.com about this, but it's really been bothering me. So, over the last few weeks, ESPN has laid off, I think, over 100 employees because of falling ratings at the network. And to preface, I don't usually comment on things like this because I want to keep these types of issues out of sports, and I'll get to that. So ESPN has laid off about 100 employees, some of who have been with the network for decades, decade and a half, whatever. And it's because of falling ratings. And many speculate that the falling ratings are because ESPN, which is owned by Disney, has gotten more political over the years and less professional in the way they do business. And I'm not going to comment on that per se, but I will say that you can notice that they have gotten more political, and some of the things that they say are different than how they used to handle themselves as the generation kind of changes behind the anchor desk over there. And so people are turned off by the fact that politics have made their way into their sports. And that's what I want to talk about is we have been so consumed with politics in this country all the time, but especially over the last year, 2 years, as we got through an election season and now we're in a new administration in the White House. Regardless of who you voted for, it was a very tense time in America when that was going on, and politics, as usual, is very tense. And so I spoke to this back when it happened at the end of the year, at the end of 2016, and I said the sports year in 2016 was one of the greatest we'd ever seen because it did what it was supposed to. The Cavs won their first title in franchise history. LeBron brought the championship back. The Cubs ended a curse nobody thought would ever end. All these things. Peyton Manning said goodbye. Kobe Bryant, Vince Scully, all these legends walked away. 2016 was one of the greatest years in sports because it did what it's supposed to do. And what sports are supposed to do is to take your mind off of the things that are going on so you can enjoy yourself. So you can just get away and watch a baseball game, a football game, a basketball game for a while and then return to your life when it's over. Sports are meant to be fun, are meant to be a getaway, are meant to be entertainment away from the things like politics and responsibilities and stresses of our everyday lives. We need things like sports to give us an outlet. And 2016 gave us that. In 2017, however, politics are making their way into sports. So you go and you watch a sporting event, and suddenly the commentators or anchors are making comments about the president, or making comments about the issues, or making, or saying these things that they shouldn't be saying because they're talking about sports. Regardless of what side you come down on politically, Republican, Democrat, Independent, Tea Party, whatever, politics has no place in sports. Sports is its own thing, and it needs to stay that way. Sports is about sports. Sports are about the players, are about the fans, are about the coaches, the outcomes, wins and losses. They're not about feuds, they're not about politics, they're not about religion, they're not about any of that. They're about getting away and having a place to go to every day when you watch a game, to get away from the stuff that's on the news, the bad stuff. So ESPN has been forced to lay off all these people, and it's speculated that it's because of things like politics making their way into the network. And I don't know if that's true. I'm not going to comment if that's true, but I'm saying if it is, it's time that the politics in sports stop. They do not go together. They should not go together. I do this show because I love sports, and I love talking about the joy of sports, the fun of sports, the competition. I don't want to sit here like I have for the last 5 minutes and talk about how politics don't belong in it, but it's something that's bothered me. So I wanted to just say that. But stay tuned to blogger.com, as I will be posting a more in-depth article about that. But I wanted to mention that on here because it's really been on my mind. So back to what sports is supposed to be. Fun topics. It's time for this week's Romans Ridiculous 6. Let's get started. Number 1 on Romans Ridiculous 6 is probably the only... Nope, there's 2 non-NBA related things on here, and this is the first one. Number 1 on Romans Ridiculous 6 is the Braves-Pirates rain delay. On, what's today, Friday? On Wednesday evening, the Atlanta Braves and the Pittsburgh Pirates started a game in Atlanta, and it had been raining in Atlanta for most of the week. But I believe both games prior to the Wednesday game, which was the third game in the 4-game series between the Braves and Pirates, had at least some form of rain delay or threat of weather or something. So on Wednesday, the game starts as scheduled at 7:35, and they get through 6 innings. Which the rules in baseball, once a game gets through 5 innings, it's an official game, and if weather becomes an issue, you can call the game and it could be a final. An official game means it can be called final. If you're 3-4 innings and you get rained out, it's postponed and you finish the game later. But 5 games and after, you can say it's an official game if the rain becomes substantial. So 7:35 they start playing. At about 9:45, the game had gotten through 6 innings. The Pirates were up 3-2, and the tarp came out. And so it was about 9:45, and because it was through 6 innings, it was an official game at that point. The crew came out, the teams go into their clubhouses, try to wait out the weather. So I believe the Braves played Mario Kart. Some people went to sleep because they didn't know if they were going to play again. 3 hours and 12 minutes later, they decide we're going to finish this game. They come back out onto the field, they start playing again. The Braves almost immediately tie the game and take the lead. And then they eventually win. Even though towards the 8th and 9th inning it was still raining pretty hard, but what are you going to do? After deciding to keep playing a game after 3 hours, you're gonna finish the game, no matter what. So that's what happened in the game. The reason it's ridiculous is because the game was official at 6 innings. The rain was substantial enough for the delay to be 3 hours and 12 minutes, which, by the way, was longer than some games. The rain delay was longer than the game to that point. It was about 2 hours and 10 minutes at that point. The rain delay was an hour longer than that, and 3 hours and 12 minutes are about the game time of most games, about around the 3 hour mark. So you add the 3 hours and 12 minutes onto the 2 hours and 10 minutes that the game already had, 5 hours and 20 minutes after the game started, both the teams took their places to finish the game, and it affected the outcome. If the game had been called as a final game at 6, the Pirates would have won. 3 hours and 12 minutes later, the team comes out, and the Braves win. I guess that's why you decide to play the game, to finish the game, because that can happen. But it shouldn't have happened. If a game... First of all, the restart didn't come till 12:50 a.m. The game didn't end till 1:53, an hour later. So, by the way, if you factor out the rain delay, the time of game when they were actually playing was about 3 hours and 10 minutes, 2 minutes shorter than the rain delay itself. So, if the rain delay is longer than the game up to that point, it's probably time to call it. If the day changes, if midnight hits during the rain delay, it's probably time to call it. I feel bad for the Pirates because they probably should have gotten a win that day. Instead, they got a loss, and you could tell they were mad about it because that was the second game of a 4-game series, Yeah, that was the second game of a 4-game series, so that was on Tuesday. Excuse me, that was on Tuesday. It's the second game of a 4-game series, well, Tuesday and Wednesday. And the Pirates, you could tell they were mad because they absolutely ran through the Braves in the final 2 games of that series. Point being, the rain delay was 3 hours and 12 minutes. The total game was about 6 hours and 15 minutes, and it ended at 2 in the morning. That game should have been called. The Pirates should have gotten a 6-inning win, and they didn't. That's ridiculous. Number 2 on Roman's Ridiculous 6 is the NFL has decided to, starting, I assume immediately, to shorten the length of overtime from the regular quarter length of 15 minutes to 10 minutes. Usually it's baseball that worries about the pace of play instead of football. Football and basketball don't have to worry about pace of play because there's always something happening. There's always action. People are always moving. And anybody who's listened to my show before knows that I have an issue when it comes to ties in the NFL. There should be no tie in a competitive sport of any kind. That's not what we do. That's a product of the participation trophy generation, which is a whole nother episode. So, the NFL shortens its playoff or overtime rules to 10 minutes, which only means one thing: more ties. I believe there was 2 or 3 last year, 2 or 3 the year before that. We've got more ties in recent years, way more than the years prior to that. Ties are only becoming more common in the NFL. So why do you think that taking time off the game time is going to help that? We're just going to see more ties. I wouldn't be surprised if half the league had ties on their record by the end of next season. Who does that help? Most NFL fans will tell you that ties are infuriating because nobody wins. If you grant a tie, you can ask any coach, any player, if you grant a tie, both teams feel like they lost. The fans feel like they got cheated. And what do? Shortening the NFL overtime to 10 minutes will only make things worse. But that seems to be something that Roger Goodell's good at. So, that's ridiculous. Number 3 on Roman's Ridiculous 6 is coming soon. Number 3 on Roman's Ridiculous 6 is Golden State and Cleveland round 3. We already mentioned it, and this is a trilogy now, apparently, is what they're going for. But this can't be good for the NBA, guys. I know you when you get to the finals, you want to see matchups with the stars, and these two teams are loaded with them. LeBron James, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Love, Kevin Durant, blah, blah, blah. But if you're getting to the point where 3 years in a row, there is a reason that this is the first time ever that the same 2 NBA teams have met in the finals 3 years in a row, because the NBA makes changes, because you shouldn't be able to do that. Even when the Bulls three-peated twice, they played different opponents. This is bordering on the ridiculous. Yes, the only level of intrigue here, for me at least, is that it's a best of 3 basically, because both teams have won one. So it's winner take all round 3. But this can't be good for the NBA. When Kevin Durant signed with the Warriors, I said it then. It's just taking something away from the rest of the league, the rest of the fan bases. They care less. I used to have a boss when I was in college that told me he didn't watch the NBA until after Christmas because nothing mattered. And over the last couple of years, that's become more and more true. It doesn't. Now we've gotten to the point where the season doesn't matter until the finals because we're just looking forward to these 2 teams. But less and less people are interested the longer it goes on. I heard somebody say, in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs, the Wizards and Celtics played an amazing series. 7 games, 7 close games. There was star power. It was a great series, but nobody cared because they knew it didn't matter who won, that they were going to lose in the next round to Cleveland. The fact that Golden State has swept the West and they're undefeated going into the finals. The fact that LeBron, the Cavs only lost 1, which was the only interesting part about the playoffs until this point, is because the Celtics beat the Cavs without Isaiah Thomas, which was interesting. But that's the only interesting part. Nobody seems to care about the NBA regular season anymore, and now most of the playoffs, because they know what's happening. When sports becomes predictable, that's never a good thing. So Golden State Cleveland round 3 is ridiculous, and let's hope it's the last one. Number 4 on Roman's Ridiculous 6. I believe yesterday marked the 1-month mark since Russell Westbrook was eliminated from the playoffs, and he's still the front runner for MVP. We haven't even thought about him for a month, and he's probably going to get an award for it. He's nowhere close to a championship or anything of actual note. And he has not been seen on a basketball court in 30 days. And he's going to get an award for it. That's all I have to say about it, unless I want to go on an entire rant about him like I did the 2 episodes ago in 2K Westbrook, which I don't. So, Russ being eliminated 1 month ago and us still talking about him as MVP is ridiculous. Number 5 on Roman's Ridiculous 6. This was a more recent story. Cavs coach Tyronn Lue said that defending against the Celtics offense is tougher than defending against Golden State. Strategically speaking aside, strategy aside, that's stupid, because you ran through Boston. You had a hiccup. You had a hiccup and you lost 1 game, but you ran through Boston basically without breaking a sweat. And you're going to tell me that the team that you are now going to face in the finals for 3 straight years, a team who has added one of the best players in the world since you saw them last, is not as hard to game plan against as the team that you just ran through in the Celtics? Okay. The Golden State, even if you were wrapping them up and just basically sitting on them, they'd still probably hit threes. There's no way that the Celtics were more difficult to game plan for than the Warriors. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous. The Warriors are the best team in the world, and you're a young coach, so we'll let you slide on that one, but that's ridiculous. Number 6, and finally on Roman's Ridiculous 6, are the Warriors again. The Warriors have made kind of a habit now of opening their mouths, and specifically Draymond Green, and calling other players dirty, such as Kelly Olynyk, Kelly Oubre, guys like that. Names have come up. I don't know all of the names, but names have come up. And here's why that's ridiculous. No team has had their players' names mentioned as being dirty more than Golden State. Draymond had an entire playoff run last season where he was kicking guys in the crotch. He got suspended for it, and that probably cost Golden State the championship. Zaza Pachulia got into some dirty player talk when they were playing the Spurs, and he was responsible for Kawhi's injury. and Draymond is still Draymond. So, I don't think the Warriors are in any position to call anyone in the league dirty. Are there dirty players in the league? Yes. Can we see that with our own eyes? Yeah. But is it incredibly hypocritical for a team that's gotten more talk about being dirty and having dirty players than the Warriors, as the Warriors, to go and criticize other players when they still do what they do? Absolutely. For the Warriors to comment, the Warriors are the last team that should be commenting on how dirty a player is. You can talk about how dirty a certain play was, and I don't think any of us will doubt that the Kelly Olynyk play on Kelly Oubre in the Celtics Wizards series was borderline at best on being dirty. That you could call plays into question, but to say that players are dirty players, those are the last words that should come out of the mouths of anybody that suits up for the Golden State Warriors. That being said, them calling other players dirty is ridiculous. That's all we have for Roman's Ridiculous 6. Let's move on to the ever-so-coveted award of Emperor of the Week. And this week's Emperor of the Week is LeBron James. Solely because of what I opened the show with, he is now the NBA's all-time leading playoff scorer. So congratulations to LeBron James, just another notch in your incredible career that is not yet over, and it seems that you'll be around for 6 or 7 more years. Can't wait to see what you do, how far you make it on the scoring list for regular season all-time. But for now, congratulations on being the all-time playoff scorer, and we'll see. Good luck to you and the Cavs against the Warriors in the NBA Finals. Hope you have a good run, and hope it's a good series for both teams. That's all the time I have for this week. For Empire Sports Talk, this is Roman Gennaro signing off. Stay tuned to blogger.com this week, and look for that ESPN post, and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. See you guys next week.